You know, it's kind of odd. Despite being a pretty big Mario fan, I still haven't covered the Funny Plumber Man's games on my channel here, beyond a Starroad video I did when I was like a blissfully unaware pre-egg specimen. Finding a Mario game I don't love is like finding a cheap in World 1, so digging into more Mario games for videos is definitely something I want to do moving forward. And what better place to start for a second time than with these two oddballs? Probably doesn't come as a surprise when I say I didn't actually play these when they came out. I was a 2000s kid after all. In fact, I didn't even play Land 1 until a few years ago. Well, I got to play Land 2 when it landed on the 3DS, like a decade ago. God, I miss Virtual Console, and the 3DS in general, honestly. Didn't own too many games for it, but it had a cute menu and the store was really nice and animated. I miss it quite a bit. Which is why I've modded mine, so I can get even more mileage out of it. Anyways, now I'm getting sidetracked. Let's dive into Mario Lands on the Game Boy Part 1. One fateful day, a black cloud covered the skies of Sarasaland. A crack formed, and beyond the frame, King Koopa moved aside to make room for the evil space monster Tatanga, who emerged to conquer Sarasaland. How was he gonna do that? By hypnotizing everyone in the 4 kingdoms of Sarasaland and then making them do his bidding. Whatever that is, probably shouldn't ask. And from there, secure Princess Daisy's hand in marriage. And yeah, okay, let's go. Can't have him doing that. Go for it, Mario! That's what it says in the manual. And my god, is it a cute manual. Look at these cute little illustrations. I love them. I've never been one for owning game manuals and stuff. I only really care for the game and getting to play it, but I love when manuals have cute little illustrations of all the little things you can do in the game. Oh yeah, and then there's the actual game. It's classic Mario, alright, with pants-shitting physics that'll make you have a heart attack every time you make a jump. Crushing enemies under your weary souls has just the right amount of weight to it, and collecting coins is as satisfying as ever. Of course, some things have definitely changed making the jump to a handheld, and that mainly has to do with who was working on it. With the usual Nintendo EAD team busy doing something, the R&D team took over the helm for this new handheld Mario title, and Land 1 kind of sticks out as a result. Just when I'm settling into its vague Mario-ness, it throws a bizarre curveball my way. Grassland, desert, water world, that whole verse is going straight into the bin, as this game will, in no particular order might I add, send you to the ancient Egypt-inspired Piraputo Kingdom, not Birabuto, that was a translator mistaking Hadakten for Dakten, Muda, Easton, which couldn't be any more conspicuous, and then Chai, or as I like to call it, Taiwan. Enemy-wise, it's about as exotic, with sphinxes, giant chicken McNuggets, and whatever the hell this thing is, sending Mario into a world of hurt whenever they get the chance to. Their methods of attack are also pretty varied, how they move about and the like. Really nice sense of variety from this group of D-list enemies. Oh yeah, and Biokinton and his army of chickens, how could I forget? He's my personal favorite. Goombas, oh honey, you already have Goombas at home. Goombos. And Koopas? Well, close. We got Bombshell Koopas. But I like to think of it that it's one of those things where if you played Land 1 at the time, those differences may have not stood out as much, especially if you were just a kid. Think Mario 2. If you just played Mario 1, it's just a new title, a new adventure. You didn't have decades worth of established tropes to color your expectations that heavily. Mario didn't necessarily equate question mark blocks or Bowser, it just equated Mario and, you know, a lot of jumping. I played Mario World as a kid and I didn't really think of it as that strikingly different from Mario 64 in all honesty, even though they're quite different. Then again, I wasn't born in the 80s, so I have no clue how people reacted at the time, but it's a fun food for thought. We've seen how much Mario games love paying tribute to 3 and World, with both of them setting the tropes that later games would follow. Land 1 slips into that crack of doing things differently, but none of those things actually sticking in the series for whatever reason. It all makes it stick out like a sore thumb. I'm curious, as someone who grew up on an original Game Boy Advance, how were you supposed to see Mario on this tiny little screen? Like, when I think of classic Game Boy titles, I think of large sprites on tiny backgrounds, not the opposite. With no backlight, I can't imagine this game being a very friendly road trip title. The light post passing over you while you're pressed into the backseat can only help so much with deciphering what's going on here in Sarasaland. And that's a shame because it makes it harder to appreciate the charming sprite work here. Tiny and minimalist, the kind of economical sprite work where every pixel matters. Makes me want to open up a sprite and try drawing for a bit, even if it kinda stinks. Nowadays, you're probably playing this in an emulator or something, in which case you can finally see crusty small Mario in all his proper glory. The backgrounds usually do a good job of contrasting the foreground sprite work, except for 3-2's glaring waterfall. Ouch. Another thing that I always have to adjust to during revisits is Mario's sprite size, and how that relates to the gameplay. Unless you're pixel perfect most of the time, passing through one block spaces is never consistent. And lining up to hit an endless coin block can be frustrating when your big head keeps hitting the surrounding blocks instead. In general, the sprite sizes feel rather inconsistent. Goombos, they're quite small a target to hit, and in past games that's what they've always been, slow-moving ground targets for Mario to land his Rs on. With Mario dwarfing them in size here, it's the equivalent of bringing an RPG to shooting range. I couldn't bring myself to saying that Mario Land controls well. It's not really that far from Mario 1 where you either float up gracefully like a Lakitu or slam down like a Thwomp, but they're still alright once you adjust, and for the kind of short burst levels you get here, they do their job admirably. Never a dull moment in these levels. Scattershot would probably be the keyword here, like a shotgun loaded with ideas, blasted at the wall. These rolling rocks, which I swear to god must have been some kind of foreshadowing to Hazy Maze Cave, I always kind of forget they're in the game until I get to Easton, the most chaotic world in the game by far. At some point, the game gets quite obsessed with throwing you into these kind of tunnel layouts, and not exactly sure how I feel about them. For all its variety, the game still periodically suffers from repetition, whether it's bonus rooms outright being repeated or level layouts being reused. And I guess I gotta bring up the power-ups sooner or later, since there's only 3 of them. The classic Super Mushroom is here and does exactly what you'd expect. Same goes for the Starman, which is rocking the can this time around. But then there's the Super Ball Flower, a significant side grade from the Fire Flower. In some ways, it's absolutely worse than that of the regular Fire Flower, but it's got some interesting tricks up its sleeve. Instead of its projectiles traveling across the ground, they go diagonally down and ricochet. Just hitting the enemy is a challenge in of itself, as you have to line yourself up properly to make sure your projectile even connects. And unlike the Fire Flower, you get fewer shots overall, so if you fire a projectile and it bounces around endlessly, you have to wait quite a while before you can fire again. And curiously enough, as if it's to make up for how unorthodox it is, you can actually collect coins with it. So just sit back, grab your tango, and watch the dough roll in. This only really came in use for me in some of the bonus rooms where coins are just thrown about everywhere, but it's nice to have. Good way of scoring some lives, which you'll definitely need. Well, one of 2 ways. The other involves reaching the bonus exit station at the end of every level and having your way with the ladder game. A bit repetitive, but I have a soft spot for the absolute hyper track that plays here, and having an optional challenge for just how to finish the level is a neat idea. Since this game is monochrome, the the bonus games have to be represented by hearts instead of the classic green mushrooms. Not that different from Doki Doki Picnic, now that I think about it. My favorite of the many screwballs this game has to offer are the shmup sections. Sure, they're quite simple and not that hard to get through, but the addition of breakable blocks with power-ups in them, along with the classic shmup patterns you'll come across, makes them a lot of fun to get through. And like a shmup segment in a Mario game, for some reason my brain can't entirely compute that. For all the things I retroactively wish the future Mario titles would bring back again, it'd be to experiment with something like this. Like, this is fun. Shame there's only a grand total of like 2 of these, but unlike me, this game understands the value of brevity. And as we all know, brevity is a 7-letter word starting with the letter B, and I like B's, and I like the B button. But not for this game. You see, Mario Land has a bit of an issue where Mario is too fast and dies. This happens to be one of the few games in the series where I'm not too keen on running. There's no momentum here, just instant top speed the moment the button is pressed. You have to slow down and watch your step. Rushing it will surely end in your untimely demise, so to speak. There's a proverb I read somewhere. Regardless of how I feel about the classic Mario soundtracks, spoiler alert, I really like them, I could never in a million years argue against their staying power, because my god can they stay. There was something very meticulous about how precise the music was in previous titles, notes rarely, if at all, wasted. Considering Koji Kondo has gone on record saying that he would listen to his compositions over and over again until he got something that wouldn't wear out through repetition, I think that labored feeling checks out. But exit Koji Kondo and entered Hirokazu Hip Tanaka, and hip he most certainly is. Tanaka goes all out with his take on a Mario soundtrack, straying from Koji Kondo's well-known motifs. Barring this stage, now that I think about it, not putting the Game Boy's crunchy sound chip to the test just yet, this was a launch title after all, but with a group of tracks this good, that really doesn't matter at all. It's striking to me how there's not a single bad track on here, everything feels so essential. It's a greatest hit soundtrack where every track is so essential that if you replaced any of them, the end product would be worse off. And trust me when I say that's not the nostalgia talking. And that means keeping the heavily stereo-separated Can-Can Invincibility song. My personal favorite tracks are the Stage 2 theme with that iconic melody, and then the Stage 4 theme with that oriental riff as its foundation. It borders on cheesy, but balances out just how much of an earworm it is. Great harmony during the verses as well. Although most of the tracks come off as pretty playful, one notable exception would be Stage 1-3 rocking this foreboding quasi-Egyptian hook. Surprisingly atmospheric, making some good use out of the 2 pulse channels for some tasty delay. Gives it a spacious feeling which works wonders. I was introduced to this track through its appearance in Super Smash Bros. Brawl on the Wii with an awesome arrangement to boot. Brings back so many memories from Subspace Emissary, honestly. All in all, it's one of those game soundtracks that's very easy to return to, and god do I wish more of these tunes would return in later games. So, you'll spend your entire playthrough adjusting to the controls, and by the time you've come to terms with them, the game's already ready to throw down the curtains and roll the credits. Well, not before finishing off Tatanga in his core warship. What are the more unique final bosses in Mario, playing out as a bullet-hell dodging exercise rather than your usual platformer affair? And honestly, one of my personal favorites. In general, the boss fights are pretty fun and varied. Some call back to Mario 1 with the drawbridge, and some play out as aerial battles. Really cool stuff, honestly. And by the time the game was over, I felt like I had finally warmed up my gamer skills, so I simply went through it one more time because, well, why not? A second playthrough lets you play in hard mode, which increases the amount of enemies that the game throws at you. Think Kirby's Dream Land. And just like Kirby's Dream Land, this mode fists my ass to hell and back, so no, I don't think I will show you the level select screen anytime soon. Oh, here we go, paisanos. It's Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. With a change-up in staff came yet another change-up to the Mario formula. Biggest change-up being that I can finally see Mario on my screen. Of the 2 land titles, this was the one I actually owned growing up. God, I miss owning games instead of whatever the hell this thing is. So, whatever happened to Mario after his return for Sarasa Land? Well, nothing much good. Brand new on the scene is Wario, who stole Mario's castle while he was away. Yes, he has a castle. No damsel in distress, just a game of greed between 2 plumbers. This setup was inspired by the idea of Mario having a quest that didn't involve doing something for someone else's benefit. In this case, no helping the monarchy. So, Mario has to collect the 6 golden coins and unlock the gates to his castle to eviscerate Wario. Eschewing Land 1's classic Mario formula of numbered worlds and linear progression, Land 2 presents an open world with 6 worlds to choose from right off the bat. And not the world kind of open world where stages unlock multiple paths to choose. Every world is open to you from the start. You can tackle them in any way you want. Worlds vary in the amount of stages and even how you access them and progress throughout. Macro Zone has a linear progression while Tree Zone branches off by stage 2, leaving the choice of stage 3 up to you. My personal favorite area isn't even on the overworld. First you have to go to this hippo statue thing, progress along the stage until you find the special exit, then suddenly you're walking on. As a kid, it felt like a journey getting up there, and it's a real jump in scenery. Going from Grassland World 1 to Desert World 2 is cool and all, but when the levels are connected in such a memorable way, you feel like you're part of something way bigger. That playful personality of Land 1 is still very much present here, with new exciting concepts being thrown at you in every stage, especially with the D-list enemies this time around. Oh boy, yokais, Dracula, balls, and piggies. There are enemies here that just run away from Mario. I have no clue what these things are supposed to be, but they're a nice touch. It's such a nice and varied mix of baddies, always themed after the world you're in. And when it comes to locations, just wow. Going into space, entering Mario's swollen ball sacks, recreating Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. These are just a sample of the kind of things you could come to expect from this game. Naturally, not everything sticks like the Tree Zone coda. Mario Zone has some questionable level design gimmicks and tries calling back to Land 1's nugget writing segments with little fanfare for me. Space Zone Stage 1 not having the flying ability when the preceding stage introduced it, and the following stage heavily relying on it, always throws me off. And the less said about Turtle Zone, the better. But now that I've said that, I guess I have to dive into it, don't I? The water stages kind of stink. 2D Mario hasn't exactly been my go-to for underwater stages, but past games certainly didn't have bad ones, barring maybe one exception. Mario 1 had brief but fast-paced water levels where enemies were like bullets to dodge. Mario 3's were often vertical and had power-ups that could completely flip the difficulty switch. For a game with such a dynamic difficulty range, I love how they handled them. And then Worlds were probably the most plodding of the bunch, not all that fun in comparison to, well, any other kind of level where Mario World's buttery smooth controls shone. Is it shined? I think it's shined. But they have nothing on this. Actually, I'm not sure if I dislike Land 2's or World's more. World was slower, but Land 2 with its level design is tedious. The ones here feel like they're designed around the idea that you constantly have to squeeze through narrow spaces with enemies barely giving you enough headroom to maneuver. Mind you, the first time that happens, it's exciting, but when you realize that's the main obstacle used in these levels, it's more tedious than anything. How placing hidden blocks underwater isn't considered a war crime is honestly beyond me. I always try to get Turtle Zone out of the way as early as possible just so I don't have to bother with it later where I tend to get fatigued. This is certainly the kind of game you can knock out in a day if you put your mind to it, which I appreciate. Thank God for saving. Before I forget, I really should mention the music. Leitmotifs string together the soundtrack into a cohesive whole, like a stick of glue or something that you probably shouldn't be sniffing. And God is it good. And do I even have to say anything about Space Zone? Kazumi Totaka created a more than worthy follow-up to Hip Tanaka's earlier exploits in Land 1. Definitely on the more dynamic side of things. Love his use of pauses, gives the tracks a lot of breathing room. Pumpkin Zone makes some really nice use of the pulse channels, a surprising little atmospheric piece that still sounds playful. And at no point does that cohesion I talked about earlier ever make the soundtrack run into repetition. Probably by virtue of the game's length, which once again is on the shorter side of things. Containing 6 worlds, Mario Land 2 blows its predecessor out of the water lengthwise by about, I don't know, like an hour. So I guess by not a whole lot, but still it's something. Still a certified road trip title if you ask me. This game follows the Mario 3 school of difficulty, where you go from Fire Flower to Super Mario instead of instantly down to Small Mario. The philosophy that most if not all Mario ventures seem to follow. I always thought that was interesting how in the Japanese version of Mario 3 it was straight down to Small Mario regardless of which power-up you had, just like Mario 1. This is the idea that Land 1 subscribed to. It makes sense as Bomb Flower Mario and Super Mario look identical. In the international release of 3, it was more lenient and that became the standard for the series, but only after Mario World, which for whatever reason was back to Mario 1 again. These games really zigzagged in terms of difficulty now that I think about it. There's a level for what I presume to be farming lives in the overworld. There's an official Mushroom Kingdom casino not too far away. The game showers you with coins, and killing enough enemies rewards you with a star, which you can then put to use and get more lives. Ringing the bell far above the level exit gives you access to one of 2 mini-games where you can score bonus games and power-ups. Reaching the bonus exit is never really that hard, so having 2 mini-games rather than just 1 is definitely appreciated. This is all to say that you won't be running out of lives at any points during the game until maybe the end. More on that later. Oh yeah, I should mention, I hope you weren't too attached to the Bomb Flower, since that makes no appearance here whatsoever. The classic Fire Flower takes its place instead, and we even have an all-new power-up in the form of the carrot, which turns Mario into Bunny Mario. And yes, this is the land equivalent of the Super Cape in Mario World, so it breaks the game's difficulty in half, but it's a load of fun to play around with, so it's forgiven. Oh, and I hate saying this, but no can for the star. Yeah. The level design is less scattershot and dense here, and unlike any other Mario game before it, it feels like the majority of the levels here are to some extent power-up conscious. Pretty much every power-up has a utility. Super Mario can spin jump like in Mario World and break blocks, Bunny Mario can completely break apart the game and is vital in finding some special stages, and Fire Flower Mario... My god, this may be the first game where Fire Flower has any kind of utility beyond just extra firepower. Well, not counting Bomb Flower Mario and the coins thing, being able to break apart Fire Flower blocks, this truly is the future of video gaming. Okay, not exactly the most creative function, but hey, it's something, and I appreciate that even small Mario has a function, being able to fit into small spaces, which are thankfully not too common. Wouldn't want to start avoiding power-ups after all. The controls have certainly seen a change here. That stiff, heavy momentum is pretty much gone, and instead everything feels considerably lighter. I've always liked when Mario games give Mario a little weight, lending every Goomba stomp just that added oomph. But this is nice after just how ramshackle Land 1 felt at points. One thing I'll never get used to is the sheer height you can get with a well-timed stomp. I mean, Jesus, you really do go sailing. And I love how this game looks. Bigger sprites, easier to read, varied backgrounds. This game just oozes charm like an open wound. It's so much more animated, somehow more charming than its predecessor, and that's actually an impressive feat. The big change here is the sprite size. Everything has so much more room to breathe, and you get a lot more detail with that. With bigger sprites comes a smaller view, but the levels are built around that, so it still plays well. Can we talk about boss fights? Because this game sure has boss fights with a capital B and F. Jump 3 times on their heads and watch them crash. This is the one step down I can think of, honestly. The boss fights just aren't that great. It's the same song and dance every time. Boom boom their butts into oblivion 3 times and then you're done. Thematically, they're bonkers. Suppose that's the saving grace? I love the witch. She's really cool. And the 3 little pigs brought back some fond memories of bugging my mom to tell me the same bedtime story over and over and over again. Sorry, Mom. Also, I love that Tatanga comes back for a rematch, and he's somehow even more of a pushover than in Land 1. Poor guy. Oh god, I'm sorry. That's that's the fax machine. Oh, okay, it's from DKL. Okay, let's have a look. From Funky Kong, alright, okay. Dear Amanda, you forgot the secret stages. So yeah, about those secret stages, huh? I'll have to admit, it took me ages to come across these as they're tucked away pretty well. They contain some sprite work you won't see in any other part of the game. Unused content, perhaps? Who knows? But it's neat. I love little tucked away secrets like this that can take a few playthroughs to reveal themselves. For beating them, you get a new animation for the hub area, and that's it as far as I'm aware. In the case of Macro Zone, you can skip stage 2 for instance, but in most cases, they're just a deviation from the main path. Feel free to let me know if I missed anything, as I'm not exactly sure what the point of some of these are. I'm starting to feel that maybe this is one of the more cerebral Mario games. So this game may have been generous for most of its runtime, but for good reason. The final level is the ultimate test of Mario CBT. One shot, no checkpoints, lava everywhere, tight jumps. Wait, hang on, did Mario's own security measures actually screw him over in the end?
Please record your message.
You know what? That's gonna be my headcanon. I'm guessing that Wario just hastily threw together a security system in case of any intruders, but it'd be funny if it turned out that Mario's own trap screwed him over in the end. Well, assuming if you ran out of lives, which trust me, you probably won't, this level will give you some kind of hell if it's your first run. Honestly, it's exhilarating. After comfortably coasting along, having played plenty of other Mario titles before, it's nice that this stage then comes along and really puts your platforming skills to the test. And on top of that, it's mercifully short, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. Perfect way to close a portable title, if you ask me. And Wario himself is no slouch either. Plays a lot like one of the Boom Boom fights in Mario 3 with the added twist of Wario wielding power-ups, which is a nice touch. But after 3 rounds of dueling, he eventually goes down, and Mario remains victorious. Wario's cast out, and Mario's castle returns back to its former self. And that's Mario Land 2. With these games, you're getting a very weirdly shaped slice of the Mario pie. One without the flavors you might come to expect from the series, but nonetheless surprisingly rich. The first pie is a bit uneven, sure, but the second one, just wow. Not sure where this pie analogy came from, guess I'm just hungry. I still haven't had lunch recording this. Mario Land 1 and 2 are special, and games I think any platformer enthusiast could get a kick out of. And I guess if you're a deadhead and you like LSD, you'll like these games. I don't know. I'll see you later.